Thanks everyone. So, can I just start with a few different things? One, I 100% agree with Michael's comment about engaging with the young planners. And do you want to know why? I heard an interesting story this week. In Queensland, we have grade 4 students teaching grade 1 students coding and robotics. I don't even know that stuff. We've got grade 4 people doing it. So the stuff I'm talking about tonight is 100% in the realm of young planners. But I guess my first takeaway message for you all is that for those of you in the room who are perhaps at the other end of the spectrum from the young planners, you need to understand this stuff, because if you actually block it and refuse to get on board, then we are doing a lot of damage. So it is the next big thing in planning. So I'm trying to be a little controversial, I'm trying to be a bit thought-provoking, but more than anything, I guess the work that I've done is actually try to implement this stuff as well. I really dislike people who talk about all this stuff and then go, thanks very much, and walk out of the room. I genuinely believe if you can't implement this stuff, then you're just throwing more kind of food up into the air with that. So I've got some examples of how I'm doing it. But these are the challenges for us. The two biggest things that influence our profession and influence the world is urbanisation and datafication of our world. And the datafication of our world is a term that started to be thrown around now to say that more than ever, we're going to be in a digital world. 64 and 86% of the developed and developing worlds will be urbanised, and they'll be a digital world like we've never experienced them before. And this should be critical to planning, because if this isn't already core planning topics, then it needs to be. Because for all of the reasons up there, more than ever, planners need to understand how to work in urban cities. And this is going to be our challenge. You know, the way that cities are going to work is going to depend on how quickly the planning profession can get on board this kind of stuff. How quickly we can learn and adopt and use big data as well as the smart city technology to make cities better places to live. Because there's a real risk here that if we don't, they'll end up being really horrible. So my presentation I want to cover a range of topics. Big data. Some ideas around mobile phones and data tracking, how we can use that as a profession, path intelligence, a bit of augmented reality, some stuff around QR codes, and ultimately what this all means for planning. So it's a bit of a wide-ranging topic, but hopefully there's a bit in it for everyone. So for those who aren't familiar, you might have heard the term big data, but if you can understand what it means, it's as simple to say we now actually have the computing power to make sense of all the data just flying around there before. We didn't have that until recently, but we now have the computing power to actually make sense of it. And this is the interesting bit. From the time that computers were first invented until 2003, we were generating 5 exabytes of data. We generated 5 exabytes of data. We generate that now every 2 days. So, and an exabyte of data is 1 billion gigabytes for those who actually really care. You think about that. That's what, 5 million little USBs. We're doing that every 2 days. And in the time I've been talking, this is all the stuff happening on the social media world. 100,000 new tweets, nearly 700,000 status updates on Facebook. The thing that I'm really interested in here, though, is the bottom line. 217 new users of the web in the last minute. This is what we're talking about. And everyone goes, what the hell does this have to do with planning? It has a lot to do with planning, because if you understand what this means in terms of the way people are going to change and use our cities differently, then we as a profession need to understand how we design cities differently to keep up with that space. 4 key things around big data. They talk about volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. These are the challenges. So the volume is a pretty obvious one, we've already spoken about that. The velocity, it is happening at a faster and faster speed we can get to it. But it's coming from a variety of different sources, from social media through to all kinds of sensors and media. And the veracity is trying to make sense of it. You know, how does someone, a computer, make sense of the post being made by App Planning tonight, talking about Chris Isles' fascinating presentation? And does that actually mean anything? Is that contributing anything to the big data world out there, or is it just garbage filling up the space? So these are the challenges that we need to work through and understand as a profession when you start talking about big data, that we need to make some sense of it all. So here it is drawn diagrammatically, because I know we love diagrams. So this is effectively Moore's Law. So if everyone hasn't heard of Moore's Law, Moore's was a guy who said quite a while ago now, that every year the volume of data and speed will double. So this is what we're now talking about. This is the number of connected devices. This is the internet of everything. So we're currently sort of sitting in here, but we're talking about 50 billion connected devices to the internet by 2020 or thereabouts. Now, if you think about that, you kind of go, well, that's pretty funny since there's only going to be like 4 or 5 billion people on the planet. And everyone shakes their head, but who here, or at your desk, would have an iPad, an iPhone, a laptop? Well, there's 3 devices straight away. So this stuff is real, but it's going up exponentially. And it's pretty scary, but that's the big opportunity. And what does this mean for cities? In my view, the greatest technological advance, I don't know why it keeps doing that, there's been 2 things, motor cars and lifts. They are the 2 biggest things that have influenced the way our cities work. There's no doubt about it. One meant that we could make bigger cities, the other one meant we can make taller cities. In my view, data is going to be the next big thing that shapes cities. It's as simple as that. It is going to be the next motor car, and how we make sense of it is the big thing. Because historically, we have been educated and trained to work in a data-poor environment. And without being dismissive of things like ABS and those kind of things, it is actually pretty dumb data. It's a few years old, it's very static, whereas this stuff, what we're talking about, is actually live. What we're talking about with big data is that we can be starting to look at stuff and cities breathing and living, and actually cities being alive. Because there's going to be that many sensors, you'll be able to log into a computer and you'll actually be able to see this stuff live. So what we're talking about is our profession moving from old lag data, statistics and survey and projections, to actually moving into live data. And if you can just think about the opportunities that that means for our cities, it's pretty exciting as far as I'm concerned. This data-rich environment where we can have the data and the systems and we can understand behaviours across small time. I'll let David fix that one. I promise I'm not doing anything. But why is this stuff important? If you start looking at places like Tokyo, Tokyo has 35 million people today, arguably one of the most functional cities in the world. Why? Because they sorted this stuff out a long time ago. They understand how to efficiently move people around, understand how to get the transportation and the energy and the water and all of those things working together. Probably one of the first people to do this work. And with so many of the emerging and developing countries moving into this space now, places like India have the biggest opportunities to grab onto this data. I heard someone say the other day that it's not going to be long before more than 50% of the population in India is under 25. If there's ever a country in the entire world that is capable of getting on board and making a meaningful difference to cities using this data technology, it's going to be India. And whilst they're arguably a developing country, some of the smartest stuff is coming out of India. But to scare you all a little bit as well, is that we all have a digital footprint and digital tattoos. Because this is kind of the interesting bit of it about it as well. So what we mean by that is that it doesn't matter what you do on the internet, you're leaving a trail of breadcrumbs behind you. You have a digital tattoo the minute you hop on the internet, and they stay with you for the rest of your life. Yes, what you post on Facebook will be there forever, someone will be able to find it. Because everything we leave behind is generating this data more and more. So we listen to music, we shop using credit cards, we carry smartphones that track where we go, we read books online, we take digital photos. All of this is records of what we do and where we go. For the record, I'm not one of these big brother people that this scares me or I get offended by someone being able to access my stuff. And if you are, then I think that's certainly one of the challenges our profession of big data stuff needs to mean for. I see this as an opportunity, not necessarily an affront to my personal sort of freedom. But as an example, did you know that any of us can go and buy from Google some searches? You can ask Google for some information. So I asked them what were the top 10 searches using the term planning in Australia. I can buy that. I was asking what it was. And I was really interested in, and it was actually really boring in the end. It was like council names, City of Sydney and Brisbane City Council. Ironically, Tasmania was number 3, one of the cities. But nowhere was any sexy planning talk, cities of the future, or sorry, that doesn't even do with the Bob planning, so I won't get to research up. But it wasn't anything really nice about planning. It wasn't anything aspirational. It was really administrative. But I guess my key point in all this is imagine the opportunity For us as planners, if we knew what the community were asking before they actually asked us, because you're using Google to see what they're typing into the internet, and even if it is 100% administrative, if you found out the top 10 searches in the ACT using the term planning had to do with a setback measurement, or a height measurement, or some particular zoning thing, if you answer before they even ask, then our profession is miles ahead, even though it's really boring. But this is stuff that we can be doing now. We can actually solve this stuff simply by using the big data that's out there today. And imagine how much easier our jobs would be. How many less phone calls we'd have to deal with if we already knew what the top 10 issues would be. But if we think about this in reverse, what actually happens if we use this to proactively go and ask the community? Not just sort of do it covertly, but actually proactively. So there's things out there now called hackathons. Now hackathons, obviously from its roots of hacking, came from people who used to try and break into computers to find stuff. Now they're harnessing these things into a more positive environment. And an example was there was a large medical issue a few years ago, actually was it recently. They put it out there for the community, the greater world to solve. They had hundreds of thousands of people from around the world all log in and collectively brainstorm this. And they came up with some medical research breakthroughs over the course of 2 weeks that hadn't been solved, because you had someone in Canberra, someone in Israel, someone in Copenhagen, all collectively working on these things. Nothing to do with planning, but imagine if we actually let the community loose through these hackathons. We might get some incredible solutions to our cities beyond our little communities that we go and ask, because it's a digital world now. You will get people engaging with you on city issues on other sides of the planet. And for me, this comes to this idea of crowdsourcing of data for use in planning. Let's use the key. So a lot of it is, sorry, keep it light, right?
What's your voice, Chris?
No, that's fine. A lot of this data is collected covertly. It's through computers and websites and keywords and phrase tracking. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. You know, I'm travelling here to Canberra from Brisbane. Over the last few days, all my computer's been spitting up on Google as hotels in Canberra and car hire in Canberra. It knows where you're going before you know you're going there, or that's this stuff. With credit cards, banking data, and spending patterns are all tracked. Your mobile phones, GPS tracking, movement analytics, and personal data like your Fitbits. If anyone's got a Fitbit, you know, really cool device, but at the same time, it's tracking you and those kind of things. And they talk about the future of Fitbits in the medical world being that your devices will know you're sick and they'll be able to tell you to go and see a doctor. There's talk of this smart toilet where you do your stuff and it senses all the stuff in there. And it tells you to go. And all jokes aside, this stuff is actually real. Nothing to complain, is sort of fascinating. The research is coming from. But I guess the proposition I put is that what if we then we move beyond the covert world into the overt world? What if we ask the community help us to share their thoughts with cities by asking them in real time, get them to contribute? So my company, we've come up with some different ideas. So this one is around crowdsourced time-lapse photography. Sounds really complicated, but it's a simple device we created. So that's a mock-up. We've now built it. We used it at the Queensland conference. That allows people to use your phones to capture life going on in your city or in parks, and they share it using social media. And the design of it is to sit in a park and it just sits there and captures life. It has no greater purpose than capturing the activity that goes on in those spaces. It allows people to share and us to get insights on what's going on in those spaces because people are capturing the data for us. We don't need to go and send people out there to do it. And this other one which we've recently launched, called Urban Tinder. Now, and my little catchphrase up there, which is for those of you who understand Tinder, helping you choose the place that you're taking home tonight. And all jokes aside, you know, this is a really serious, this is live, look, you can use this. This is an app that we've developed. So I will talk in a little bit. Place Design Group were lucky enough to win the National Planning Ideas Award last year from the Planning Institute, and I'll share a little bit about that, but we've reinvested our prize money into building this app because we, rather than just going to the pub, we decided that this was the right thing to do. So we've now invented this app. So this is an app that we use in consultation, and we would encourage local governments to use it as well, for people to like and dislike the images and build form, the types of things and places and spaces that they want their cities to look like. They can contribute, they can take photos, they can post it, the rest of the community can look at it and like it and share it. We think that this is kind of a modern world way of doing community engagement because it doesn't necessarily need to be all face-to-face. As a profession, if we can't move beyond the fact that people have to come to me, to my public display stand, to communicate with me what they want for the cities, then we will miss out on the vast majority of community engagement if we can't move to more remote ways of doing community engagement. But this isn't all of our fault as a profession. Until recently, a lot of this technology hasn't really existed. The tools to quantify and reliably measure. We have been stuck in anecdotal gut feel stuff, and that's our profession. I don't mean to belittle it as well, because I understand that's the art part of planning, but there's very much a science part to what we do as well. But I think the big data opportunity is the opportunity for us to move through and move away from our gut feel analysis and actually start to make some real true quantitative decision making around cities, because we can have access to data. 91% of adults keep their mobile phone with 1 meter's reach of them at all times. So imagine the opportunity for a planning profession if you can actually start to access some of that data and you can use that to engage with them. I guess this is a scary fact to throw into that. So there's 7.2 billion people, 4 billion mobile phones, but only 3.5 billion toothbrushes in the world. So there's more mobile phones than toothbrushes. Again, nothing to do with planning, but I can't just like that as a fact. It scares me, okay? But to show some of this stuff in action. So credit cards and mobile phones will become the new plane's best friend. So mobile phone data, it is a little bit scary, and there is an element of Big Brother and personal data security, which I understand, but I think there's ways through that. But like it or not, our mobile phones are tracking us everywhere we go. And mobile phone companies have just realised that that's an incredibly powerful data source. They just don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to make sense of it, but they know they've got something incredibly worthwhile. So here's how it works. So this is a company called Pathway Intelligence. They're using it in retail settings. And I always look at this kind of stuff because people making far more money than us in retail context use technology that we should apply to whole cities, but they're doing it just to make themselves richer. But why can't we use it to make cities better? So this is a shopping centre. The way it works is you just put sensors around your centre and it tracks people. The red dots are mobile phones, and you can draw paths of where people go. You can understand where people move through their cities. You can start to get heat maps. You kind of go, no one goes to that shop, they all go to this shop. That's the most popular place in the whole shopping centre, and the food court, whatever. But imagine if we took that technology and thinking and put it into actual cities. Imagine if we're able to make decisions around mobile phones. If we're able to harness that and what we could do differently as a profession, because I think it's enormous. So, what if we could see where people were walking and driving and we make decisions about connections rather than just guessing? Because we can tell, because the data shows they go from here to here. That's that old desire line thing that you see the one bit of grass. Well, this is just a digital desire line, but it's real. Would you potentially look to see where people congregate and put park benches there rather than just putting a park bench in and hope people sit on them? But we know where they congregate. It's probably a default cross-check between meter and census things as a measure, because again, one thing you know is that people have mobile phones. If a census is 4 years old, I'm pretty sure that we can figure out how many people live somewhere by how many mobile phone signals you're getting in between census periods. And it's another way to remotely record patronage and usage of parks and community facilities and potentially review portfolios. Imagine if you could actually say, there's 1,000 parks around ACT and we've actually used the mobile phone records and no one goes to any of those parks. Do we need to keep mowing them all the time? Can we get rid of them? Because here's some data. I'm sure if you just went out to the community and said, hey, we're going to get rid of 10 parks, they'd scream and go, well, these are the 10 parks we're going to get rid of because our evidence has shown you don't go to them. How different would that be? Because again, it's about evidence. Same thinking, our mobile phones, when they're sitting in our pockets, inside our cars, turn our cars into beacons, and that allows someone to track it. So this is already happening in a lot of the major cities now, is that traffic networks are automatically being controlled by live GPS tracking of signals. A little signal at the top, it knows when I move past one box to the next box, it should take me 3 minutes. If it takes me 4 minutes, it therefore knows the road is congested, and therefore it opens more green time up on that route all the way through until it becomes uncongested. So you're talking about a live transport network that adapts based on mobile phone tracking. If you've got one of the new fancy mobile phones and using Google Maps, if you're using that as your GPS, it'll actually tell you where there's congestion ahead ahead of you. That happens now if you're driving around Sydney. You know, Google Maps is pumping congestion data through, and it'll find alternate routes for you. If there's a congested route that way, it'll change it for you mid-track to move around congestion. So that was low. So look, there's some interesting things going on there, and I guess I look at it going, well, you know, this monitoring stuff will either freak you out, or hopefully it will spark your interest to say, hey, there's some interesting stuff out here that our profession can do. Because planners and traffic engineers can dramatically change the places and spaces in the road networks just by simply using and accessing this data. The banking and loyalty card data is another one. Is that you can buy credit card data, and I think this is again, the scary thing for those people who perhaps don't want their partners to know what they spend money on, but the good bit is that it strips your identity out there. But from a planning perspective, imagine how powerful it is that if you were actually able to go into a declined centre today and record how much money was spent in that centre, and then do the major street revitalisation or replanting program and go back in there in a year's time and show that expenditure in that centre has doubled, how much better we would be. Because you can buy this credit card data, is the companies are selling it, the government's been buying it a lot, and it is one of the most instantaneous sorts of data. Like, it's only a day old, you can buy this stuff, it's a day old. We're looking at 4-year lagging data, it just is what it is, it's one of the most reliable things. So imagine if you were able to go to your council and sort of say, hey, you know, I've tracked this, I was able to get a 1 in 100 return. How much easier would it be to go back and ask for another few $1 million next year to do the next project and the next project, if you're able to quantify? It's probably one of the greatest criticisms I have of our profession, just to say that we don't actually record and try and figure out post what we do, whether it makes any difference. We move on to the next project. Well, there's no money in our projects to actually track whether it makes any difference. But I think it's critical, and we now have the tools to do that. And getting to the end of my stuff, so this is on a different track, but it's an example, a simple example of QR codes. We started in the automobile industry to track parts. It stands for Quick Response Codes. It's an app on your phone for those of you who aren't quite into that space just yet. But they are everywhere, and they provide opportunities to immediately scan and go straight to websites. And marketeers and subversive people are using them. Here's some examples around our city. Here's really cool. You know, you can chuck them on heritage buildings and it tells you the heritage backstory and the buildings there. You can chuck these in parks. It can show you walking routes and maps and fitness trails just by scanning your code. Bus stops, live bus schedules. Just scan it, it tells you when your next bus is. You can physically implant them in your cities and put education trails and public tourism trails. So really simple things to do, allows people to engage with it. And this was sort of our planning idea that we then pitched to the Planning Institute, and we won this idea of a lot of the work that we as a profession does kind of happens and then disappears as cities and places get built and they get lost. If you can pick that up. So our idea was pretty simple, that projects like the, we'll just let this play. So our idea was to put the plaques into places and spaces that would show its history. So I would like to see every award-winning project if the awards are happening when I finished here tonight, end up with one of these plaques in it that people can then scan and go, A, that was an award-winning project, but B, this is the backstory of that project. I would like to see that evolve to say, hey, this was undertaken through a planning process, and this is where it came from. This is the backstory that happened in this site. We're putting this in our projects now. We're convincing our clients to let us put plaques in their projects that just talk about me and our company. And it's a self-promotion, but you know, you can scan it and it'll come up and tell you the place design groups and town planners and urban designers on this project. Why not? It's just a little small, it's pretty harmless little plaque. So that was our idea. Anyway, thank you. Go to the next one. And that won the award apparently, so anyway. But I have talked to Brendan about making sure that we can try and roll it out, because I genuinely believe that that's a really good initiative. I'm a convert of it, but I think this idea about QR Journey, which we came up with, is just the tip of the iceberg of how we can embed data and make people use our cities differently. So 2 ways. 1, how we get data out of the city so we can be a better profession, but 2, how do we implant our own data in the cities as well so that the community can engage better with us. So 2 initiatives. And then last one, this one's really kind of a bit out there and scary. This is augmented reality, which is sort of the next step up. So for those who don't even know what that is, augmented reality is a bit like your old 1980s 3D glasses, except it kind of uses your mobile phones. And augmented reality is less about how our cities are designed, but more how we live in them and move within them. And it will be the next revolution, the kind of thing that the iPhone did. And if, for those who can believe that, iPhones were invented in 2007, like 8 years ago. Can you remember a life before smartphones? Because I certainly don't. Well, I do remember having this big brick of a thing. I thought it was pretty cool, but this is the world we're moving. So this is an augmented reality app called Geneo. It's a simple one. You can all get it here. What I'm talking about doing, and all this Geneo, all it really does is actually blend Google data into a 3D environment. So you stand there with your phone and you turn around, and it tells you there's a restaurant here, there's a cafe here. Well, there's actually no restaurants or cafes because I walked around this area. There's no here, that's a second story. I tried this afternoon, but in Brisbane, that's what it tells you. That's on my office. But what I'm saying is that why don't we, in a planning environment, embed our own data back? Why don't we leave other professions to do all this cool stuff? Why can't we put a little plant in the thing that just says that there's a new neighbourhood plan being coming here, or there's a development application for 100 units in that direction, because people can then explore about it. I'll move away. And my last data fact is that do people know that Google Maps on your phones, over 54% of global smartphone owners use that app at least once during the month in August 2013. The #1 app in the world is Google Maps. So people are living in a digital map of the world, and as our profession, we don't even engage in it. Pretty sad. So my conclusions is hopefully it'll spark some interest. And this is stuff I'm really interested in. We're actually doing this in our professional lives. We're just talking about it, we're actually implementing this stuff, as hopefully you've seen. For us, big data is real, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. We need to embrace it, because if we don't, our profession will get left behind. Every other profession is getting on board this stuff, and if we don't, our profession will get left behind. As planners of towns and cities, we must go and do any project or initiative looking for the wider economic and stimulatory effects and benefits, and try and use this data to quantify and make sense of it. Being able to predict and quantify the impact of these is the only way that our benefit of our profession can be captured and recognised. And that's a critical bit. If we're going to keep saying that planning matters, then we need to be able to quantify. We can't just walk around saying planners matter and planning matters if we can't quantify it, because eventually someone will call that off. And whilst I think we do matter, probably we've got no evidence to say that we actually do. Mobile phone data is the single best tool that we can have. We need to be willing to buy it and look at it and make sense of it. And the phone companies are really desperate for us to get involved in this space as well, because they don't know how to do it. They just know they've got an incredible source of data. Credit cards and FBOS terminal spending, I think, will be the best way for us to ultimately prove our worth and show the impact of planning in an economic sense. You understand there's lots of other measures. But data currently comes at a cost. And this crowdsourcing is a way to get it done free. You know, not everyone's going to afford to buy credit card data, but it's not that difficult to go and get your community to help throw data your way. But I would say, regardless of the cost, I don't think we can argue about this anymore. Like, we're prepared to keep spending money time after time to generate new traffic models for our cities, yet we're not prepared to spend money to get the data and understand how people live in our cities. We're prepared to spend money to have cars use our cities, but not people. That's crazy. We need to be willing to spend the money to buy data on how people live in our cities, not just cars. The Internet of Everything is going to change our world in terms of data and how cities work. We probably need to train future planners and the current ones, that's my prompt there for the young and the old in the room, in fields of data analysis and metrics, because our future is certainly going to be less art form and more science. And I would say, as would our universities, that they are grossly under-equipped in our current planning profession to deal with these kind of issues. It's not a core part of the planning courses, by and large. They recognise that. I was at an event just recently where the Griffith University lecturer in Queensland said, hey, I need to understand this, who can come teach me about it, I need to teach my students about it. But that is the challenge there. How do we move our profession forward? And my final plug there is from Aid, my favourite kind of quotes, is that the best way to predict the future is to create it yourselves. So thanks very much.